Ever thought about like what it would actually be like if your language, the one you dream in, the one that holds all your family's jokes and stories, what if it was just gone?
Yeah.
Like on the verge of just vanishing.
Yeah.
That's what's happening right now to the Chakaliya people in India. Their language, Matika, it's only spoken fluently by 2 people.
Wow.
2. Just let that sink in for a sec.
It's a stark illustration of a problem that's frankly much bigger than a lot of people realize. The People's Linguistic Survey of India estimates that out of the 6,000 documented languages we have in the world, something like 4,000 of them are at risk of disappearing.
4,000.
Yeah.
So we're talking, what, like 2/3 of the world's languages?
That's exactly right.
Okay. See, that's way more dire than I initially realized.
Yeah.
I knew that the languages were disappearing, but I had no idea it was that bad.
Yeah.
That's a staggering number. I mean, where do we even begin to unpack this?
Yeah.
What could even be causing this massive of a decline?
Well, to understand the present, sometimes you have to rewind a bit, look back at history.
Right.
And colonialism plays a huge, frankly, tragic role here.
Yeah.
Basically, from the 1500s to the 1960s, European powers, they colonized vast swaths of the globe. And during this time, they very often suppressed indigenous languages.
Yeah, and that tragic pattern, it repeats itself throughout history, doesn't it? It's like trying to erase an entire culture by just silencing its voice. I mean, even here in the United States, we had Native American children being forbidden from speaking their languages in schools, shockingly, until the mid-1900s.
Exactly. And those policies, they weren't unique to the U.S. They were widespread and had devastating, long-lasting impacts on the transmission of indigenous languages.
Yeah.
But it doesn't end there.
Okay.
As former colonies gained independence, many prioritized economic development, which kind of ironically had its own unintended consequences for languages.
Okay, now that's where I get a little lost. How does economic growth lead to language loss? It seems counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But there's this fascinating study in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B that basically found that richer countries, they tend to have fewer languages.
Really?
Yeah, it's like economic progress somehow squeezes out linguistic diversity.
So are they saying that as economies grow, people just decide to ditch their native languages for more practical ones?
It's a little more nuanced than that. You see, as economies develop, there's often one language that becomes dominant in politics, education, and the media.
Sure.
And this creates a situation where speakers of other languages feel, maybe explicitly or implicitly, pressured to adopt that dominant language just to, access better opportunities.
Yeah, it's almost like this invisible hand pushing people towards one language for the sake of progress. But isn't that a dangerous oversimplification? I mean, we're having this conversation in English, a language that's spread globally rather than any one of the thousands of other languages spoken around the world.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that you raise. The choices we make, even something as seemingly simple as the language of a podcast, reflect in a way these broader patterns of language dominance. But individual choice is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. We have to also consider the systemic factors at play here.
Okay.
We touched on economic development a bit, but migration plays a really crucial role too.
Okay.
Think about it. As economies grow, indigenous communities are often, unfortunately, displaced from those ancestral lands.
Right, forced to move to urban areas looking for, new opportunities, better jobs.
Exactly.
But how does that tie back to language loss? It seems like kind of a huge leap.
It's all connected, though. When these communities migrate, they're suddenly immersed in environments where the dominant language is everywhere.
Yeah.
And over time, younger generations might grow up speaking that dominant language, honestly, more fluently than the language of their parents or their grandparents.
Oh, wow.
And their indigenous language just kind of starts to fade.
So it's not necessarily this conscious choice to abandon a language, but more like a gradual assimilation driven by circumstance.
Yeah.
They're trying to fit in, find their footing in a new place.
Precisely. And the numbers paint a pretty stark picture, too. A staggering 40% of indigenous peoples in Latin America, for instance, now live in urban areas, really far from their traditional lands.
Wow.
And in India, nearly half of all tribal households reside outside traditional tribal areas.
Really?
This migration, while it's often driven by economic necessity, has this really profound impact on the transmission of indigenous languages.
Wow, that really puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
So we've got colonialism, economic pressures, migration patterns. It's this like perfect storm that's threatening to just wipe out these languages.
Yeah.
It's honestly a bit disheartening.
Yeah.
Is there any hope at all? Like, are there any efforts being made to preserve these vanishing voices?
There's always hope. And yes, people are fighting back, and they're doing some really, really innovative things. One really, really promising avenue is, believe it or not, technology.
Technology. That's not what I expected.
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive to think of technology as a savior of languages.
I know, right? But think about it this way. We can now document languages digitally, create these amazing online dictionaries, learning resources, language learning apps. We even have artificial intelligence now that can help revitalize endangered languages.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. Do you have any examples of how this is actually working?
Absolutely. Have you heard of the Rosetta Project?
The Rosetta Stone.
Yeah.
Like the one that helped us decipher ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Exactly. Inspired by that, the Rosetta Project is creating this massive online library of over 2,500 languages with the goal of, digitally preserving them for future generations.
That's incredible. So we're talking about more than just dusty archives here.
Yeah.
These are like active resources for people to learn and use these languages. That's awesome.
And there are some incredible success stories, too. Take the Cornish language, for example. It was declared extinct in the late 18th century.
What?
Gone, vanished, or so everyone thought.
Wait, so what happened? Did someone, find a lost tribe of Cornish speakers?
Not quite, no. Dedicated individuals, community efforts, and, you guessed it, the internet, all played a part in bringing Cornish back from the brink.
Wow.
It's now being taught in schools again.
Wow. That's a testament to the power of human determination if I've ever heard one.
Yeah.
But reviving a language, especially one that's been marginalized for so long, must be incredibly difficult. What about protecting languages before they reach the brink? Are there any, preventative measures being taken?
Absolutely. Prevention is key. One strategy that's gaining some traction is recognizing the link between land rights and language rights.
Land rights and language rights. Now, that's an interesting connection. Can you explain that a bit more?
Think about it. For many indigenous communities, language is more than just words. It's very deeply intertwined with their cultural identity, their understanding of the world, their connection to their ancestral lands.
So it's about preserving a whole way of life, a way of seeing the world. That's passed down through language.
Exactly.
It's much bigger than just words.
Exactly. And that's where land rights come in. A 2015 study found that indigenous peoples, who make up about 5% of the global population, lack land rights to 75%, a staggering 75% of their ancestral territories.
75%. That's heartbreaking. So you're saying that by securing indigenous land rights, we're also creating a space for their languages to thrive.
Precisely. When indigenous communities have secure rights to their land, they have the autonomy to practice their cultures, pass on their traditions, and, crucially, keep their languages alive.
It's about acknowledging that these languages are woven into the very fabric of their connection to the land.
Yeah.
It's about preserving entire worldviews. What other ways are there to bring these languages back from the brink? So we've talked about tech and land rights as ways to preserve languages, but what else can we do? Are there any other creative solutions out there?
You'd be surprised. One really fascinating avenue is film.
Film? Movies?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Just think about the power of film for a second. It can captivate us, It can transport us to different worlds.
Yeah.
And it can expose us to new languages and cultures all in a couple of hours.
It's true. A good movie, it stays with you long after you've seen it.
Exactly. And that's why creating films in endangered languages can be such a powerful tool for revitalization. Take, for example, this film, Kauai Kuna, the first feature film made entirely in the Haida language, an indigenous language spoken in Canada.
Wow, a whole feature film, a full-length movie in a language that most people haven't even heard of.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Did it get any, recognition?
It did. It actually won awards at the Vancouver International Film Festival. And I think it proved that films in endangered languages, they can be both culturally significant and, cinematically successful, too.
See, that's what I'm talking about. It shows that there's a real hunger out there for these stories, for these glimpses into different cultures and ways of life.
Yeah.
What a powerful way to keep these languages alive.
Absolutely. Promoting film in endangered languages, or even, something as simple as adding subtitles to those films for wider accessibility, it could be huge. It could really engage younger generations, spark their curiosity, and inspire them to learn and value these languages.
It's like planting these seeds of appreciation for linguistic diversity, hoping that they'll, blossom in the future.
As we wrap up our deep dive here, it strikes me that language is about so much more than just words.
Yeah.
It's a vessel for culture, history, identity. It's about these unique ways of seeing the world that have been passed down through generations.
It's like the echo of our ancestors, whispering stories and wisdom across time.
Beautifully said. When we lose a language, we're losing a part of ourselves, a part of our shared human story.
It's a reminder that every time we encounter a new language, whether it's in a film or a song or even just a conversation on the street, we're being offered this little glimpse into a world of untold stories and perspectives, just waiting to be discovered. So the next time you hear a language you don't understand, maybe don't just see it as foreign or different. Think of it as a doorway to a whole new world of understanding.
That's a beautiful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of disappearing languages.